listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Back to By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C. I'm your host, Sean Blackman, here with Jacquie Lukman. And as always, we are your guide for connecting the political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us. Oh, yes, we're here. We're back. Top of the hour. It is Tuesday, August 15th, 2023. And, of course, in 20 minutes, you'll be able to give us a call here by any means necessary to give us your thoughts, ideas, questions, or concerns about anything you've heard on the show today, anything at all relevant happening on this earth. We want to hear from you. That's not the only way that folks can get in touch with us here on the show. And if you would, please, Jacquie, let the folks know how they can holler at us.
That's right, Sean. There are so many ways for our allies, accomplices, and comrades, that's y'all, to reach out and touch us here at By Any Means Necessary in Washington, D.C. You can do that by calling us at 3:20 p.m. Eastern Time at 202-521-1320. That's 202-521-1320. But you can also listen to our show live on your radio dial at 105.5 FM and 1390 AM. In the Washington, D.C. area from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time each weekday. And shout out to our friends over in Kansas City, Missouri, listening to us right now on 102.9 FM, 104.7 FM, and 1140 AM. But did you know you can also listen to our shows at SputnikNews.com/radio? Scroll on down the page and click on By Any Means Necessary. And guess what? We're streaming for your viewing pleasure on Rumble right now at rumble.com/C/BAM Necessary. The chat is live. And remember, friends, at 3:20 p.m. Eastern today, you can call us at 202-521-1320. That's 202-521-1320. But wherever you are in this world and however you do it, we want to hear from you.
We most certainly do. We most certainly do. And, you know, Jacquie, I wanted to talk today about 50 years of hip hop. And I came across this story about Vivek Ramaswamy, of course, Republican presidential candidate. I think it's probably fair to call him a long shot candidate for the Republicans, who actually rapped a part of Eminem's song Lose Yourself back from 2022. Yep, surely did. Of course, from the 8 Mile soundtrack. Oh. And this was at the Iowa State Fair that took place recently. Now, he had just wrapped up his, quote, Fairside chat with Republican Governor Kim Reynolds and was actually signing autographs when the song started playing. And then, you know, he starts rapping along with it, snap back to reality, oh, there goes gravity and all those sort of things. And, you know, mom spaghetti and all of that sort of thing. And he said that the song is actually his favorite, quote, walkout song on the campaign trail. Oh, no. And he's now Ramaswamy is someone who, at least according to reports, wants to make young voters a priority in his campaign. He came on Fox News last month. And he talked about when he was in college, and I can't believe I'm about to say this. He says when he was in college, he was a libertarian rapper and proceeded to rap, my name's Vivek, it rhymes with cake. Good God.
What?
It isn't about me. It's about the United States is about liberty. So here's what that means. This dude is corny, dog. Like that is just painfully corny. But be that as it may, and all embarrassment aside, we are very happy to be joined for the hour today by Dr. Jared Ball, a father, husband, professor of Africana Studies at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland, the curator of IMixWhatILike.org, and author of the book, The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power. Dr. Ball, thanks so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thanks again to you all for having me. And I think I'm right on time, given where I thought I just heard you all wrapping up that last intro or segue.
Absolutely. I don't know if you've seen this, Doctor, but we were talking about Vivek Ramaswamy rapping, verses from Eminem's Lose Yourself, which was a big song, but in the ensuing, 21 years, it's kind of become something of a meme. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that or about Vivek Ramaswamy in general here.
Well, not specifically this particular highly skilled political artist, but what I would think, or rather what I think is reflective of, is something that I did want us to talk a little bit about this hour, which is that during this 50th anniversary hip-hop birthday celebration for hip-hop, so many of the contradictions that I and others have been struggling to argue around for a long time, decades in fact, are playing out even in that example. For instance, this idea that hip-hop is itself its own entity or its own nation, with its own set of elements and principles and standards, all have been discussed, debated, and defined absent any clarity around the politics or ideological perspectives that should comprise this hip-hop nation or comprise the politics that are applied to the various elements that are just said to be involved with hip-hop. So what ends up happening is, as we just saw, you could have people claiming that we're in a hip-hop nation and we're all in this together, and yet someone can claim to be a hip-hop libertarian. We've seen hip-hop Republicans, self-described. We've seen any variety of left versions of the isms applied to this vague concept of nationalism, all of which I think have aided us or led or paved the way for the moment we're in now, where during all this celebratory discussion, very little is focused on the actual material and lived conditions of the people who are said to be the progenitors of hip hop. So we can have these celebrations and praise ourselves, particularly those of us of a certain hip hop generation, while not dealing with the fact that we haven't had the movements and developed the politics within that nation that would actually address the real horrific and ever increasingly unequal conditions that we are witnessing right now. So that's why I think when I heard, as I popped on what you all were talking about, it just seemed perfect. Because of course, why can't you have a hip hop libertarian who is not only wrong politically but clearly has no skill on the mic? Why not end up with something like that if we haven't clarified what it does mean to be within this hip hop nation, or to be truly emblematic of the struggle and the people that produced hip hop. So Anyway, those are just, Anyway,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could probably get my dad to rap better than that. But I did want to get into just those issues, Dr. Ball, because when we're talking about hip hop, we're talking about an art form that for years now has been a global phenomenon. People in every country and every language are making rap music, and they're battle rapping and, engaging different forms of what we would consider hip hop culture in their own way. And it's a working class movement. And also, I would argue, an Afro-diasporic movement with, despite nativist pronouncements to the contrary. And so what do you think we sort of need to understand about this mixture of factors that gave rise to hip-hop? And what are some of these contradictions, politically and otherwise, understanding some of all of these different strings that you were just naming? Because you're absolutely right. I mean, there are Trumpist rappers. You know what I mean? There are people who consider themselves MAGA rappers. Right. So clearly, politically and culturally speaking, it's the Wild West. And so I'm just curious your thoughts on how we got to that point.
Well, I mean, we got to that point because the conditions that produced the expression in the first place have not been addressed. So hip hop emerges at a time when programming for music and arts programs in schools is being cut. Program funding for schools in general is being cut. There's a post-civil rights Black Power moment of sort of the aftershock and aftermath of both the trauma of war and also the increased messaging and propaganda around that war having been successful. So a lot of people born in the hip hop generation, myself included, had to first overcome not only what we were living as a real experience just in the world, but having that not match the mythology we were being raised up with, that Dr. King had solved everything and Black people in particular, but others, everyone in general, had it better than before. Something we're hearing even more now. And as hip hop emerges in a response to all of that, the expression itself was created by young people who are largely politically uneducated, disorganized, and just looking to find their way in developing an artistic and cultural expression in all of its various forms, and then looking to defend the right to do it. So that's been my argument for the last couple of years now in particular, that so much of what my generation missed was that our initial intent to defend the right to express ourselves in this way, we lost sight of what that meant politically, and what it meant or what it didn't mean politically. So if you don't have a revolution, a political shift in power and a change in social relationships, and people continue to produce art in that context, the art will suffer that context. And that's what's happened. So people don't control. So from day one, from the first track that we all point to, rap music in particular, the form most popular out of hip hop and all of its elements, has been a corporate product, manipulated and controlled for the interests of a music industry, of a broader political apparatus, advertising and commercial apparatus, an ideological one, a post-World War II world that had evolved 30 years before hip-hop, that was looking to use media and propaganda to promote the United States as a singular hegemon and capitalist power in the world, and the rightful response, the only logical response to a post-Second World War European and Western arrangement and colonial arrangement. So all of this is the context. And add to that all the particular politics and struggles of the 70s and 80s that were incomplete and insufficiently revolutionized or done away with. And you have what we end up with, a version of Black and African expression that is held in a colonial form, that is used to enhance and enrich those who are in power, who have more than any group benefited from the wealth produced by all the various elements and streams in hip hop. And we end up in a situation now where Black people's wealth is headed to zero by 2053, and all of the other inequalities that you all and we all deal with in a variety of ways every day are still in existence. So, and worsening. So, and then I'll stop here by saying that for me, the worst part of it is that while all of these material conditions get worse, the messaging is that there has been some sort of victory and that we can celebrate, and that if it's not complete, we're headed in the right direction. And I just fully disagree, and think, again, that the examples you raised between MAGA and this politician and rappers, and never mind the politics of the mainstream celebrity just in general involved in rap music, and we see what we see. Conspicuous consumption, anti-Blackness, anti-woman, anti any other gender or sexual preference, despite the nominal inclusion of a handful of representatives of those communities who are given big-time contracts and said to be changing the world themselves. And here we are.
And Jared, it blows my mind that over the past couple of days, I've heard people say things about hip hop and its relation to corporate America that really, I don't know why I was shocked at how, quite honestly, stupid these comments were, but I really do think it is indicative of exactly what you were just saying, how there are some folks involved in the genre who are able to literally capitalize on the corporatization of hip hop, where, everybody else who is a part of hip hop culture, we hip hop heads, our material conditions have not changed. We have not won. But these people who are very much entrenched in the corporate culture of hip hop believe this alternate reality of what hip hop today is. Like I've heard people say, and I admit I don't know who originated these comments, but I've seen them posted on Twitter, and one comment is that hip hop changed corporate America. A blatant lie. I just think that's a really uninformed, just obviously blind take on the power of hip hop. I don't think that it is that hip hop changed corporate America at all. Corporate America just does what it does. It changed its tactics to capitalize on a market that was not that they weren't familiar with, that they soon figured out how to market and make money off of. And then the other is that hip hop gave people jobs who don't love it. I'm not even sure if I understand what that means, but I really think these two statements about hip hop now try to convey this power of hip hop that I feel is very classist, but is also very defying of the reality of what hip hop really is today compared to how hip hop started. And I'm wondering how you feel about these two weird comments, or is it just me as usual being, prickly and just not liking things?
No, you just have an accurate analysis of the world and an understanding of the world. So, yeah, I mean, I started my own commentary yesterday with the Instagram post of one of my favorite DJs, DJ Sonic of the legendary Soul Controllers in the DMV here in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, College Park, University of Maryland legends, WPFW legends. And someone I respect tremendously, but in his post on Instagram, he said that, he said it's time to commemorate the hip hop movement that changed the world. And my question, similar to what you're asking about corporations, is in what way do we understand or interpret that change? Because you could argue, yes, of course, and you outlined it already, Jacquie, that there was change in the sense that corporations learned, we can now use this to market our products, and we can now use this to market our ideological perspectives, and we can now use this cultural expression to promote the world that we want to see exist and benefit from. So in that sense, that did force a change, and in some ways, this is part of the trick that my generation, I think, just frankly missed. That the initial resistance of even black radio and the commercial environment to this quote unquote fad of rap music and fad of hip hop that we all, in our variety of ways, argued against, saying it's not a fad. And I remember a kid myself, yelling at, I don't know, teachers or my mother or some other adult, it's not a fad. This is for real. It's it. This is the great. But in our defense, we missed the fact that as it slowly got welcomed in. I mean, in the panel I was on the other day at Howard University, one of my co-panelists was praising the fact that individuals have used hip hop to become curators of museums and deans of colleges and professors at universities of hip hop studies. And the point I was trying to raise is but look at what that co-optation, that neo-colonial interaction entails. Because again, where I always start with is the material conditions of the people involved. If they're not improving and in fact worsening, then I think we can only look at the way that hip hop, in this case, has helped and eased that process. And then we have to look more honestly at what we missed in wanting to defend our right to express ourselves, that once we were given that right and welcomed to express ourselves through this cultural expression, those who were selected for celebrity and popularity have been, again, as Fanon talked about, turned into something that testifies against us. And that's why we have the most well-platformed and funded and selected by the three. There's only three corporations at this point that determine all the popularity of commercial music, regardless of genre, including hip hop. But those three companies have picked the spokespersons of hip hop to tell their success stories, and then this, of course, gets magnified as a collective victory for the people, and it's not. So you're not missing anything. The issue that I think all of us have is to what extent can our criticism penetrate this seemingly infinite tidal wave of mythology that grafted onto the broader American mythology is this thing of linear progress from something horrific to something good. So just as Prager University can now tell us that Frederick Douglass was praising the United States for being the first country in the world to truly try to eradicate slavery, we can be told by Prager University adjacent corporations that hip hop came along about 50 years ago and solved all the problems. It browned America. It paved the way for an Obama. It made billionaires out of Jay-Z and Beyonce. It gave jobs to various professors and academics to teach and to curate museums. So the fact that the collective and the people, including the South Bronx, that is said to be the original birthplace of hip hop, the fact that it's bad off today, if not worse, is irrelevant. And so anyway, so no, you're not crazy. You just suffer from inaccurate analysis, and those of us with that ailment are going to continue to find some difficulty in this world.
That's a fact. And, you know, and here I am thinking that Obama solved all the problems. And it turns out it was hip hop all along. And speaking of hip hop, you know, Obama was someone who also utilized that. I would argue not only to try to kind of have an appeal to young people, but I would argue also to shore up his blackness in a way that, you know, and I think, doesn't he release like a playlist every year or something like that? Like We Care, you know what I'm saying? And this is actually why I think that intergenerational conversations are so important, because I can't imagine having to justify hip hop as a form of music to my parents or to whatever authority figure. Because I mean, when I was a kid, it was just a matter of it being noise. You know, they would say, "Boy, turn down that noise." You know what I'm saying? And I wanted to say real quick, you know, Jared, because you were talking about your favorite DJ, Josh Sonic. I wanted to shout out my favorite DJ who's no longer with us. His name is Robert Earl Davis from Smithville, Texas. He went by the name DJ Screw. And he invented his own genre of music that has not only impacted rap, it has impacted a lot of popular music culture. So when you go on TikTok and you hear Desperado by Rihanna, Slow Down, that's Screw's influence. So I just wanted to show a lot of love to him. Jackie, you got a favorite DJ?
Can I just add one more for you real quick?
Oh, go ahead.
Is that he influences go-go music.
Talk about that.
Really?
Which, oh yeah. If you listen to, I was just listening to a track from the What Band the other day. If you, Go-Go does a screwed version that they will get into in certain points in the jam. And they will, and you'll even hear him say, you know, I forgot exactly what the call was on this one, but you might even hear him say something. He said, let's screw it up or something like that. And you hear them get into that. They hit that 808 bass and then they slow it down and you hear them break down. Even the live percussion just slows down and they get into this. So yeah, so to me as a go-go head, I am deeply appreciative of DJ Screw, rest in peace, for having made it. Even if go-go is gonna be influenced, then you've really done something. So shout out to him for sure. You
just blew my mind.
I did not know that about and I dig What Band, and I've never now I have to, now for the rest of the night I'm gonna be looking for that song.
No, it's not in any just specific song. The times I usually hear it are, and this is one of the issues, you got to find, like they even have it online, the extended live jams, and in the middle, somewhere throughout the night or throughout that set. Or sometimes even in the middle of a particular song, they will just. So the next time I find one, I'll share it for sure. But it's the beauty of go-go. It's embedded in the context of a whole thing. So it's not one particular track or anything like that. But yeah, anyway, but for sure,
absolutely.
Nice.
We're going to move to our first break of the hour. On that note, here on By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C. We'll be right back. So please stay with us.
By any means necessary.
So, Sean, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, Bob, that's easy. I want to talk about the need to stop the development of self-driving cars.
Again, Sean, you're driving me nuts. I think the self-driving car thing's already out of the gate.
No. It's never too late. See, now the leading experts in the field, I mean, just pick one, whichever one, leading experts have repeatedly warned us about the dangers of artificial intelligence. Look, I'm telling you, man, we have to stop the robots by any means necessary.
I see what you did there.
Yep.
Tune into our show By Any Means Necessary daily from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Radio Sputnik. And don't forget to call in at 3:20 p.m. to our studio number 202-521-1320.
And if you miss us live, check us out on SputnikNews.com, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts and stay up to date on the latest political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us. Welcome back to By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C. I'm your host, Sean Blackman, here with Jacquie Luqman. And as always, we are your guide for connecting the political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us. Phone lines are now open, 202-521-1320. That's 202-521-1320. Myself and Jacquie Luqman continue to be joined by Dr. Jared Ball. And Doctor, we've been talking about the complicated and problematic politics that make up this global phenomenon we call hip hop. And I just had to raise this issue that happened recently. I'm sure you all talked about this on Black Power Media, but this block party thing. Well, actually, it was the announcement of the Block Party concerts in New York. I think this was actually in July, featuring New York Mayor Eric Adams and none other than KRS-One, the teacher. And that was kind of wild to me. And, you know, like KRS-One, he has legit like one of my favorite bars ever when he said, every president we ever had lied. You know, I'm kind of glad Nixon died. And I wasn't even political when I first heard that, but there was just something in it that just felt good and it felt true. And in the years since, I can say that I'm still very much in tune with that sentiment. But what did you make of the teacher, as he's called, getting down with this former cop that is literally the mayor of New York?
It's disgusting and disturbing. And as someone who, again, takes almost every opportunity possible to, in context, remind folks that Reagan died during my wedding, and you know, we raised a glass. That to hear and to see KRS, who for me was among as much as any popular figure, political or not, artist or not, politicized me as a young man. To see him ever move and this is sort of the point I was getting at earlier, this teacher, this genius, this undeniable, brilliant man who has overcome so much and done so much and helped so many with, you know, in terms of our own development at some point, is himself obviously confused politically from his time spent with Alex Jones to his time spent with Kwame Ture and not clearly picking up enough, to his to his confused books like Ruminations and the Gospel of Hip Hop. You know, this incessant desire of his that I've always struggled with to redefine hip hop as itself an identity. When we know he knows better in terms of how race plays a role and how racial identity has itself shaped him and hip hop more broadly. So in some ways it's not inconsistent that he would do this with Eric Adams. It's just disturbing, because I'll continue to say in this, you know, the more I study propaganda and the more I pay attention to the world, the more convinced I am of this point, that it doesn't matter. It's something I've said going back 20 years when Talib Kweli started doing Coca-Cola and Toyota commercials, and Mos Def was doing Coca-Cola and some other like car commercial. It doesn't matter how good your art is. It doesn't matter how political your speech or your activism is. If your popular image is easily associated with the proper development and management and process of the state, everything else you do is at best some kind of attempt at balance, but in general is useless. So if it doesn't matter that KRS could have anthems like Sound of the Police and Black Cop if they're used in cartoonish white comedy movies, and if he's going to turn around and shake hands with and hug up with the top cop in New York City, it just doesn't matter. So it erases everything as far as I'm concerned. It erases the value and political impact of everything else that he has done and would say outside of that space. So that's what I saw when I looked at that horrific event. Yeah.
Absolutely. We've got a couple of callers on the line here. First up is Dave. Tell us what's on your mind.
Hey, happy Tuesday, Sean, Jackie, and Jared. Jared, I was watching some Neil Postman interviews over the weekend from the late 80s and early 90s, and I don't know if in your journalism studies you've ran across his scholarship, but I felt his critique of TV was really spot on in the late 80s, and his critique would only be amplified but if he were to talk about the internet or especially social media. But I loved his critique particularly of broadcast news or quote-unquote news, particularly talking about how fragmented it is and how it's sandwiched between commercials to the point where it's not news because you're flipping from topic to topic every 30 to 60 seconds, and how the human brain's not really set up to really interpret or derive much meaning from that. So I was actually thinking about the great work you do on Black Power Media and how most of the stuff on Black Power Media is more long form. And I think you have even received some criticism for being maybe too long, but I felt like that was a good counterweight to this super fragmented news we're used to doing. So can you talk about how you feel like an audience can interpret or understand or derive greater meaning and context from a longer form of quote-unquote news that you attempt to deliver, and how you might contrast that with print news? So interested in all your thoughts. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dave. Appreciate you calling in. Hope to hear from you again soon. Next, we have Ingrid. Tell us what's on your mind.
Hello, did you say Ingrid?
Yes, that's the name in front of me. Is that not your name?
Well, there is a blank space there. Anyway, yeah, now that the Oliver Anthony song has gone viral, I've actually been watching quite a few of these little podcasts analyzing it. And I'd be really curious to get your all's take on rich men north of Richmond.
Well, thanks a lot, Ingrid. Appreciate you calling in. Hope to hear from you again soon. I know what you're talking about. I've not actually heard the song. I've just seen people talking about it. But Dr. Ball, wanted to give you a chance to respond to both of those questions, as you will.
So with the last one, I'm not familiar at all, unfortunately, with what's being referenced. So I can't say anything about that. Sorry. But in terms of Dave's first question, which was excellent, and I appreciate his clear viewership of BPM. Neil Postman, I'm very familiar with, though it's been a long time, and I think he was largely accurate. The only thing I remember, it's been too long, but the only thing I remember as a personal critique was him not feeling like he didn't do enough to explicitly call out the role of capital and capitalism. But I may be wrong on that. It's been too long. But I am familiar with the work, and largely, what is it? Something Us Ourselves to Death. And Chomsky and not Dave, but Mike Parenti and many others, sort of formed a core of a lot of the critical work. Robert McChesney. Though I've criticisms of all of these folks and whatever, but I think that their work has been central to my own development, particularly within the field of communication and journalism. And to the other question, the point, I prefer long form largely because I come out of teaching and I come out of community radio, where we didn't have to deal with commercial breaks, we didn't have to deal with corporate playlists, both of music or ideas and news and discussion. And I prefer long form discussion. There's also the reality that I am not a video editor and I don't have the time. It's easier for me to talk off of notes and an outline for 2 hours than it is for me to organize that thought into something that I could then edit with some skill that I may not even have to a 15 or 20-minute video. So that's just, so I've heard the criticism, I get it, and I just hope we can find people that are either willing to handle this form, my preferred form, or to take an hour video or 2 hour video and watch it in segments as I do with others. You don't have to watch it all in one time. But that, and then there was a question about the written form, and to the extent I remember and understand the question, I would just simply say, unfortunately, that version of literacy has never been fully developed, I think, among any population. And it's never been, and at this point, it is probably discouraged. It feels like it's discouraged as much as ever in terms of consumption of long form written work. And which is, I think, part of, and I'll stop here, but I think it's part of an overall process that the commercialization of education and journalism, increasingly so, although it's always been set to do that, has encouraged in terms of also in not only in terms of what the audience is able to distill in one sitting, but what is allowable in terms of investigative journalism, which is always seen as the most threatening and the least desirable form in commercial space. So if I was clear, I hope I'm making sense, but the competing impacts, I think, have made the written work less enticing today than ever.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I mean, I guess for me, I prefer long form because I talk for a living. And that's just, it is easy. And I don't know why it is. It's just, I guess, something kind of innate in me. It's easy for me to sit down in front of a microphone and expand on a topic for an hour and really get down into the weeds and make all the connections and that kind of stuff. And I think the thing that the long form versus short form thing is, it's really a phenomenon born out of social media, right? Where people are used to getting their information in 128 characters in 2-minute videos. And people think that they're getting the whole story of what they need to know from that. And you're not. I don't care what the topic is. I don't care where the platform is from. Even if the meme or the short video is great and it hits on great points, you're not getting all of the story that you need from a short form kind of thing. So there is a need for long form. There's a need for reading. Y'all need to read. I swear you do. and it's just that there's just no getting around that. I think so. It's a both and, I think, rather than an either or situation that we all need to be in. And as far as this song is concerned, the right wing is very predictable. You always know when the right wing is behind something, when there might be some legitimate criticism of quote unquote big government, because it's always big government with them, not capitalism, right? But even if there are decent criticisms of government and government policy, it's right wing when they gotta dump on people on welfare, which is in this song. There is a line about there are people in the street with nothing to eat and fat people milking off welfare. It's like, look, the rich people in Washington are our enemies, but those people who are on welfare are not. I don't care if they are fat. I don't care if they are milking welfare. Those people who need public assistance to eat and survive and be able to afford a roof over their heads, they are not their enemies. And the fact that the guy who wrote this song put those people, those vulnerable people, on the same level of his enemy, of the working class being built by these rich politicians north of Washington, that was a big old red flag for me.
Yeah, and of course we know that just the term welfare is racialized in the U.S. And so, I mean, the fact that he's putting in these obvious dog whistles, I mean, certainly I don't know whether or not this cat like really believes those things or is like consistently been a right winger. But what we do know is that being a right-wing grifter is both easy and lucrative. But we're going to move to another quick break on that note here on By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C. We'll be right back, so please stay with us.
By any means necessary.
We are talking.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
You are listening.
We give you the most essential out of the endless information space.
Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
Stuck in traffic? No problem. Stay informed. Stay tuned to Radio Sputnik on 105.5 FM or 1390 AM in the Washington, D.C. area. Need more? Follow us on Facebook or check us out on SputnikNews.com.
Back to By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C. I'm your host, Sean Blackman, here with Jacquie Lukman. And as always, we are your guide for connecting the political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us. My dear friends, phone lines are still open, 202-521-1320. That's 202-521-1320. I am here. Jacquie Lukman is here. Dr. Jared Ball is here. And Dr. Ball, you know, we've been talking about hip hop, of course, this hour. And just a moment ago, we were talking about journalism. And I wanted to discuss the way that you conceive of the combination of these things. Of course, you have your piece, I Mix What I Like, sort of a literary mixtape of sorts. And, being sort of undergirded by this concept of emancipatory journalism that I've heard you spoke about so much in your work. And I'm wondering, how do we reconcile that in a media landscape in the United States of America where a handful of corporations basically own media? I mean, own it outright. And yet the rank and file person in this country thinks we have a free press. Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, one of the wealthiest humans on this planet. But we still think we got a free press somehow. And this is a broad question, but I mean, we're also having this conversation on a show that's on a network that has been deplatformed, not because of anything that we said or did exactly, but simply because its presence contradicts the interest of imperialist narratives. And so, I mean, how do you sort of see that aspect of it when discussing 50 years of hip hop?
So, again, emancipatory journalism is just simply put, the argument that people involved in activist organization for their people involve themselves in producing their own media and journalism that supports their work, with an understanding that it's not that, for instance, Sputnik didn't do something. It's that it did do something in presenting itself as a media platform that cannot be openly or brazenly used by the U.S. And its state and its corporate environment to its purposes. And by simply existing on that basis alone, never mind whatever the politics of Sputnik are, in fact or not, that alone is an act worthy of targeting by those who run this country, because they know, and as I've had the privilege to study a little bit, they've been very clear that media and communication are essential to warfare, to colonial rule, to the management of the population, and that's, to any extent that is not used to that function, it is a threat. So the only way I think we can attempt something towards reconciliation is recognizing that and doing what we can to insulate ourselves through the work that we're all involved in, and more organized, collegiality, I guess, among those doing that kind of work. To in some ways try to create more of an echo chamber and to magnify the messages that we are all in variation in discussion with. That's the only way I think we can make any moves on this situation. I mean, again, outside of a broader political shift in power, media and communication are going to be set as they have been. So, that. And that's one reason why I think in terms of the hip hop narrative, much like the broader U.S. narrative, we are getting what we're getting because those shifts in power and social relationships have not occurred. And those in power, for lack of a better phrase, in the moment, have been able to reorganize themselves and repackage and disseminate versions of ourselves that maintain things as they are. So that's what we're getting. And now not only does Bezos own the Washington Post, but with everybody seemingly able to start a YouTube channel or a podcast, there's this equally mythological component to this notion of a free press and a freedom of communication, where everybody has an access to a microphone, and some with no real experience, study, education, or anything who have very popular platforms. And I don't mean education in the traditional sense, but I mean political education through struggle. And if they're able to pop up and do whatever they're doing, and if a Pat McAfee can even upset the ESPN empire with his YouTube show, it does give this appearance that not only is there a free media and a free press, but the ability for the little guy and the regular guy, so to speak, to challenge the biggest corporations. And that adds, again, to this a layer of complexity to us trying to figure out how we're going to do the kind of work that we need to do to convince people that they need to engage media very differently and consume it very differently and work with others of like mind very differently. But that's the closest I can come to a semi-coherent response to that question.
I mean, on your platform, Black Power Media, in the past couple of days, there have been some really great segments on hip hop, and from my perspective, some really great journalistic segments on hip hop, interviewing, talking to the people, particularly the women, who have rounded out the genre and whose contributions have been largely overlooked if they have been paid any attention to in some I don't know, a tertiary way, some cursory way. And I feel like that's the power of independent media and long form media, that these stories that are not told by the corporatization of this beautiful genre that we have created. And I honestly don't know which genre is more beautiful, jazz or hip hop. And I know that might seem sacrilegious to some people, but I think in terms of the cultural impact of both of those musical genres, and you might as well throw blues in there, it's hard for me to see how hip hop has not maybe surpassed the cultural influence of jazz to some degree, in some ways. But even when you look at the cultural impact of hip hop, the corporatization of it and the mainstreaming of it has taken away its culture, really. And it's been in independent media like Black Power Media, like watching the interviews that, Kalonji has done and that you have done over the past couple of days, really have helped me almost fall in love with hip hop again. Because there was a minute, Jared, where I was like, nope, no more. I can't take it anymore. I can't take more of these little skinny jean whining boys up in here. I can't take more, no more. I don't know what these people are saying. And then when I find out what they're saying, none of their lyrics have anything to do with anything that's going on with the, material conditions of our people. And in my, old hip hop head mind, it's like, this is not the hip hop I grew up on. And I forget that the progenitors of the genre are still around, and they still have something to say, but we're only going to hear it on independent, non-corporate platforms. And that's where I see the beauty and the utility of this long-form medium and the need for independent media in recapturing the culture, I guess. But that's how I see it. Now, I wonder how you feel about that particular aspect of this 50th anniversary celebration of hip hop.
Well, I mean, to a large extent, I agree, and I think it's great that we can have, particularly on BPM. I do think Monday was great. It started off with me being critical of all of the Netflix documentary that Dream Hampton directed, and then a couple hours later, you get to hear from her on Kalanji's show and get her view, not necessarily against mine per se, but her view of hip hop and the work that she did. And same thing, like you could hear me being critical of the series that Rosa Clemente had been involved with or briefly interviewed for on PBS, and then get to hear from her a couple hours later on Piper's show. So, I mean, selfishly, in terms of our platform, I think that's great. And, we don't all have to be on the same page or agree. But I think that our ability in this small way to demonstrate the kinds of breadth of perspective and critique and variety that we don't get in most commercial forms and spaces is part of the point that you're getting to in terms of the music. And, I think on some level, for me, turning 52 next month, I don't know necessarily whether it's hip hop or anything else. I'm not necessarily interested in hearing, teenagers and young people talk about going through, whatever my generation already went through. I don't want to hear about them really, or anybody, about the sex lives of anybody. I don't want to hear about any of it. I keep joking, I want everybody to put more clothes on. But part of it is just that. And I think that's normal and natural. And I'm, so I'm glad that there are young people still doing what they need to do. And that there are those who are producing a good amount of radical and positive music that are just not heard. I think it's harder to hear them than ever, but they are there. And again, that to me points to the initial point that I was making at the beginning, that the conditions that produced hip hop in the first place and that produced jazz and blues in the first place are still here, and in some cases are worsening. So we're going to, unfortunately, and Fanon talked about this as well, we're unfortunately going to get the contradictory response of high levels of oppression and great art that comes in response. I'd like to get to a point where we see what African people produce in a truly liberated space. And I'd like to see what that looks like again, even if that means having to sacrifice some of my favorite forms of music for something new and something different. But for me, it's much more important that we be legitimately free than just producing good music or art.
Yeah, and I don't know, Jared. I think maybe that's just the dad in you that wants everyone to put more clothes on, cover up. And that Dream Hampton documentary, was that the ladies' first joint?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now I haven't seen that, but I mean, just briefly while we're on the topic of women in hip hop, I want to give a huge shout out to Gangsta Boo, who's a pioneering women rapper in the South who died recently. And her birthday recently passed. And I want to say, for all of you who listen to a lot of the current women rappers in the South, like Glorilla and Sexy Red and Meg Thee Stallion and a lot of the other ones that we could name, I personally would argue that they are, in fact, Gangsta Boo's daughters. And with about 4 or 5 minutes left here, Jared, this is kind of a big question because you were just talking about the youth. Because hip-hop now has been so, I don't even think commercialized is even necessarily the term. It's like a machine that just cranks out these cats that all look the same, sound the same, and kind of make the same kind of music because there's a formula that's been found. And so the thought is we're not going to bring in an artist and develop them so they can have a long extended career. It's just like, okay, well, this kid has a viral moment. We'll take him, sign him to some nonsense, milk it for whatever it's worth for this moment, and then dispose of it. Like music is like very disposable today. And it makes me wonder, what can we do to sort of try to, mend these generational gaps that have a lot of reasons why they exist. But I think it can make it difficult to bring the best of what hip hop is to the current day, given some of these issues? And that's an unfair thing to ask you with like 5 minutes left, but I just wanted your thoughts.
No, the shortest answer I could give probably is that we just what I was saying about the reconciliation of the journalism. There's certain things we're not going to be able to do absent an actual assumption of power. So the best we can try to do is have these conversations, talk a little bit about what we don't see happening in these popular discussions around hip hop or any other forms of versions of history, and try to flesh them out and get people to join organizations and build those groups up so that we can assume enough power to have legit impact on the art and the culture and the media environment that we live within. And that's my, very quickly, that's my biggest criticism of not only the Netflix, but all of these popular discussions around hip hop, is that one of my major criticisms is that they've left out the component of what was called the hip hop activist struggle. And something I've not fully agreed with in terms of, the definition and application, but there has been this struggle within the hip hop community over how it's identified, what the politics are, what the scholarship should do and should look like, that is being left out of all of these narratives that make it easier for the grand narrative of everything is getting better and hip hop has done it to prevail, even as they sprinkle in, a few important pieces of information and criticism here and there. So that's what I think we need to try to do. We have to try to remind people that, yes, while all this beautiful stuff has been going on, there's been a constant attempt particularly within radically politically organized circles, to address themselves to these cultural phenomena in ways that make them more relevant. I mean, and that make them speak more to the true history and experience of the people involved, and that would help clarify why we are where we are today. I mean, it's just ridiculous that Black women of working age can have a net worth of $100 in 2021, I believe that study was, and we're talking about praising women having power in hip hop. I mean, anyway, I'll stop there. But I think that's the kind of contradiction that we need to struggle with, even when our friends and loved ones are involved.
Yeah, you talk about hip hop activism, and this is an aside, but y'all remember when cats was running around calling themselves raptivists?
Yes.
That was a dark
Barry
time.
Allen coined the term. Yeah, and I struggled with that all the time. Like, what does that mean? And similarly, it was one of the problems that I think we didn't get clear. Because if a raptivist can be somebody who's organizing for the Republican Party and do it in the same way Obama was a grassroots organizer, that it bastardizes the term.
Yeah, for sure. And, Jackie, Jared is so right that, like with so many other things, it's going to be difficult to reconcile a lot of these contradictions without the proper kind of movement. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's a coincidence that no matter what the issue that we're talking about is pressing poor, working, and oppressed people, the answer is always organization.
Right.
You see what I mean? And that's the only way for sure that we'll be able to take something like hip hop and pull it back from this vice-like grip that capital has on it and has had for some time. But with all of that said, I think we should celebrate this art form and all of its manifestations and all the generations and use it as fuel to push this movement forward. We're going to leave it there for today here on By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C. Want to thank Dr. Jared Ball so much for joining us today. Be back tomorrow with a new episode. So as always, we'll see you next time. Peace.